Right, so integrity. It's a word MPs like to toss around a lot, isn't it? From Rishi Sunak, implying he acts with integrity, despite all those family links to companies getting government money, government contracts, or his wife benefiting from her family's alleged ongoing business interests in Putin's Russia, despite having been handed the biggest party donation in more than 20 years by a guy also doing business in Putin's Russia, and also happening to be the Tory party senior treasurer at that. Oh, what a coincidence. Despite refusing to act to suspend the likes of Dominic Raab for bullying, or Suella Braverman for her now multiple apparent breaches of the ministerial code, despite allowing Nadine Zahawi to remain in post, despite fixing his own tax affairs when in charge of HMRC, and all the rest of that nonsense. The list goes on and on with the Tories, doesn't it? But is Keir Starmer really any better? There's the matter of Jeremy Corbyn's suspension, despite having been cleared of any wrongdoing by the Labour National Executive Committee and being singled out amongst the entire Labour membership of the UK to not be permitted to stand for Parliament as he wishes to. There's the abandonment of victims of bullying and domestic violence, such as left-wing Labour MP Ipsana Begum. There's the rigging, even at local council level now, of executives, banning Labour around the country from working with progressive parties in alliances with them to run councils, like the Green Party. Integrity is something neither main leader possesses. But where they differ is that at least Sunak is consistent in his lack of integrity, his lack of backbone, his chicken shittery, his lack of integrity. Keir Starmer is an authoritarian towards the left, and just as measly as Sunak towards his own faction on the right. This has been exposed a lot over the last several months, with parliamentary prospective candidates deemed undesirable regardless of local wishes being dumped in favour of parachuted in nodding dogs for Team Keith, effectively, simply wanting to be an MP and prepared to do whatever it takes to bring that about. No principles required, no passion for a given area, no interest in being a local representative, just somebody chasing the wage packet, chasing the expenses and the prestige that comes with that. Of course, Starmer and co sell this to the public as ensuring only high-quality candidates are able to stand. But two recent examples of treatment of sitting MPs from opposing ends of Labour show just how dishonest his narrative actually is. Now, just over a month ago now, it doesn't seem that long at all, actually, but Diane Abbott, the first black female Labour MP, somebody far too often on the receiving end of racial abuse, made a clumsily worded statement to that effect. I did a video on this already, which I'll link to, so I won't go into detail on it again here. But she made a response to an article on racism, which came across as implying that racism affecting non-white people was somehow worse than that of racism suffered by some white groups, for example, the GRT community or Jewish people. It was apparently a draft not intended to be sent. It was sent in error. Abbott held her hands up within hours of it being published as a mistake. This is all a mistake, apologising for offence caused, as you'd expect from such a statement, given how it could be taken. What she meant, as was clarified by Martin Forde, KC, author of the Forde Report, explained that he clearly understood what Diane Abbott meant, and that was that the racism suffered by non-whites is as a result of their particular protected characteristic being very much more obvious, as well as completely irrational. And he's right, that really ought to be obvious to anyone, surely. Starmer had Abbott suspended in a heartbeat, though, almost as if he couldn't believe his luck. He could do it that quickly, that easily, as if she'd just gifted it to him. Abbott being one of his most vocal critics across social media, showing far more spine in challenging Starmer's authoritarianism than anyone else seems to be these days in his party. Forde, who, if you weren't aware already, is black himself, said given Abbott's service to the Labour Party and the fact this was a standalone complaint, he couldn't see why this couldn't be dealt with pretty promptly. He's right. Why a full-on suspension? Why a month on is she still suspended with nothing having been done? Forde isn't the only one highlighting the unnecessary heavy-handedness of this move either. Labour black MPs signed a joint letter for the second time this month, demanding anti-black racism, as spelt out in the Forde report, is actioned upon, something Starmer is again ignoring because there very much is this hierarchy of racism in the Labour Party now under his leadership, where anti-Semitism is treated as more important, and Starmer's own refusal to address the Forde report's findings show he is part of the problem with that, not the solution. They have renewed their calls for Abbott's reinstatement now, of course, particularly in light of another suspended Labour MP now getting the whip back, the Starmerite MP, Neil Coyle. Coyle's offences began in 2019, where at the then Labour Party conference, he was accused of propositioning a woman 10 years his junior, made rude comments about her partner. Complaint against Coyle was submitted about this in 2022, and the Independent Complaints Board upheld the allegation, finding Coyle had broken the code of conduct on sexual harassment and that his behaviour was grossly detrimental to the party. Now, Coyle had already been suspended before this complaint was made, and indeed, if you were wondering about the span of time between Coyle making these unwanted advances and the complaint about it, the woman in question only decided to make her complaint following Coyle being suspended for a racist attack on a British-Chinese journalist called Henry Dyer, referring to him in derogatory sinophobic language, continued to be offensive even as Dyer tried to calm things down, and Coyle continued to be unpleasant towards him the following day. This is how the story goes. Dyer made a complaint about this. Coyle was suspended, though it took Starmer several days, a week in fact, to do so in his case. Having remained suspended ever since, the sexual harassment complaint added, I think it was something like 5 days to his suspension that was already ongoing, and would remain on his formal record for a year. Well, that's quite a punishment, isn't it? Coyle had apparently been begging Starmer to reinstate him so he could stand as a Labour candidate again ahead of the next general election. And despite Starmer's apparent zero tolerance on racism, Coyle has this week been given the whip back. Now, I brought Diane Abbott up before, but I could easily have used Jeremy Corbyn as my example instead. Now permanently banned from standing as a parliamentary candidate, it would seem. But here we have someone against whom racist behaviour and sexual harassment complaints have been upheld, and he's now back in the fold. Corbyn, kept out despite anti-Semitic allegations having been quashed by the NEC, kept out entirely on Starmer's say-so. Sinophobia is evidently less serious than anti-Semitism by Starmer's own actions. Sexual harassment, too, should have ensured Coyle is not good enough to be a Labour MP. Surely, you would think. Now, Coyle's excuse was drunkenness. He's apparently now quit drinking. Good for him. Certainly good enough for Starmer. Corbyn being guilty of nothing, however, isn't. Diane Abbott, having apologised and held her hands up to a poorly worded statement, not conveying her actual intent, saw her suspended in hours. Starmer wrung his hands for a week over Coyle. Man of integrity. Abbott should never have been suspended. The apology was enough. The words of a black lawyer, the words of black MPs, not little white old me. Let's not forget, though, Starmer is a lawyer. He's supposed to be believing in justice and fair play, surely, but he quite clearly doesn't. He's a Tory. He's Tony Blair on steroids. And for as long as he ignores the findings of a report into party racism he himself commissioned, he's guilty of racism by omission, in my opinion. Just today, another Blairite under investigation, Liam Byrne, who was being investigated for using parliamentary staff to help with his failed West Midlands mayoral campaign, people being paid out of Byrne's parliamentary expenses to do non-parliamentary work effectively, has also now been let off. Starmer never bothered to even suspend Byrne, no doubt because it would have left Labour without a mayoral candidate at the time, but that shouldn't be the bloody point, should it? Despite the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority finding Byrne guilty, he's been let off completely. An investigation over bullying on Byrne the year before resulted in a measly 2-day suspension from Parliament. Again, Starmer did nothing there either, connected to the mayoralty case as it was. Had to have a name on that bit of paper, didn't he? Byrne must think he's made of Teflon now. No sanction by Starmer and none by IPSA either, not even a requirement to pay back the misappropriated funds. It's one rule for us, another for them in Starmer's party. You can only imagine how that'll work if the Brill Cream shitehawk ever becomes Prime Minister. Watch and wait. We'll have someone guilty of racism and sexual abuse and somebody guilty of misappropriating public funds standing for Labour as candidates of the highest standard, yet the first black female MP won't make the cut any longer because she wrote a bad letter, and the former leader who has done nothing wrong at all, regardless of whatever media narratives may have been swallowed, will remain forever an outcast. Now, the NEC could block Coyle, but they're right-wing. We know what they're like by now. We've been seeing what they've been doing up and down the country with other candidates standing for Parliament as well. Coyle's NEC could try to pick someone else. But if Starmer wants him, watch that CLP get suspended within a heartbeat to stop that happening and protect him. We saw what happened with Angela Eagle, after all. It's what we've also seen time and time again. Might indeed be happening as we speak in Wirral West. More on that in another video to come. The one saving grace in the Labour Party, though, might be that not all members are putting up with this autocratic nonsense from the party leadership. And often it's the case that it is those local constituency parties that won't have a bar of it. So after you've liked, shared and subscribed to this channel, keen as a boatload of beans for the next video to pop into your notifications, you can take a little gander at this video where former Labour stronghold Copeland isn't putting up with any more Blairite nonsense from Team Keith. And I'll catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.